All right, let's dive right into this explainer and fundamentally reframe something we literally spend our entire days trying to avoid: boredom. You know the exact feeling, right? You're sitting there, there's absolutely nothing to do, nowhere to be, no notifications pinging, and within minutes, or honestly, sometimes just seconds, something inside you starts to crawl. It's this deep restlessness, an itch you can't quite name. Well, most of us treat this feeling as a glitch, right? A flaw in our day that we need to fix immediately. But today, we're going to look at the unexpected science of doing nothing. We're going to explore why that crawling, restless, totally unbearable feeling of nothingness is actually one of the most complex and vital neurological states your brain can ever enter.
Section 1. The War on Stillness.
Let's kick things off by looking at just how far we go to eliminate empty time from our modern lives, because we practically built our entire civilization around dodging stillness. I absolutely love this quote from the artist Fiona Apple. It sounds so incredibly simple, doesn't it? Go out and sit on a lawn and do nothing. But let's be real. When was the last time you were truly, completely bored? Not distracted, but just sitting with your thoughts. No screens, no podcasts playing in the background, no one to talk to. We constantly bombard ourselves with digital distractions simply because doing nothing has become completely foreign to us.
96. That is the number of times the average person now checks their phone in a single day. Think about that for a second. That's literally once every 10 minutes. The very moment any tiny gap of empty time appears, a red light, a queue at the grocery store, maybe a spare 30 seconds before a Zoom meeting starts, bam, the phone comes out. We use it to instantly close that gap. Because frankly, we are terrified of the empty space. And to put this intense fear of empty space into perspective, there's this fascinating and honestly kind of disturbing experiment from 2014 by psychologist Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia. He asked participants to just sit alone in a room for 15 minutes. No phone, no books, just their own thoughts. But get this, he also gave them a button that would deliver a mild electric shock. Now, before the experiment, these same people said they would literally pay money to avoid being shocked. But left alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes, 67% of the men and 25% of the women actually chose to voluntarily shock themselves. One guy even shocked himself 190 times. There is no way, right? They literally preferred physical pain over just sitting there with their own minds.
Which brings us to Section 2, the default mode network.
So, the million-dollar question is, what on earth is happening up there when we do nothing that makes it so utterly unbearable that we'd rather electrocute ourselves? For the longest time, scientists thought that when you were bored, your brain was just idling, kind of like a car parked with the engine left running. But they were totally wrong. It turns out your brain doesn't just turn off when you're bored. Instead, it shifts gears into this incredibly energy-intensive state run by something called the default mode network, or DMN. This is a highly demanding neural system responsible for self-generated thought, and it fires up precisely when there is no external task demanding your attention. And what it's doing behind the scenes is just wild. It is definitely not resting, it's actively processing your past experiences. It's running complex simulations of your future. It's taking unresolved social conflicts and replaying them. It's even connecting ideas from completely different parts of your life that have never been connected before. Researchers have found that this mind-wandering state is actually one of the most cognitively demanding things a human brain does. It's running these massive, complex executive functions simultaneously, and it requires an immense amount of energy.
Section 3. Boredom as an alarm.
Okay, so if this default state is so brilliant, so advanced, and so critical to how our brains function, why does it feel so awful? Why does it feel like a crawling, restless itch that we desperately need to escape? Well, philosopher Andreas Elpidoro's book, The Anatomy of Boredom, hits the nail on the head here. He explains that boredom is actually a functional warning system. It's all about a mechanism called cognitive allostasis, which is really just a fancy, scientific way of saying your brain is constantly trying to regulate your mental engagement and keep it in a healthy, optimal range. Boredom is simply the painful realization that your current cognitive engagement is suboptimal.
Think about physical pain for a second. Just like physical pain warns you to yank your hand off a hot stove to protect your tissue, boredom warns you to pull your attention away from an unengaging situation to protect your cognitive health. It's an evolutionary alarm system. Back on the ancient savanna, if you were just sitting around completely still doing nothing, you were vulnerable. You weren't hunting, you weren't building shelter, you weren't watching out for predators, so the brain actually evolved to treat stillness as a threat. The profound discomfort of boredom was perfectly calibrated to keep our ancestors alive and moving.
But here's the catch. Today, we live in a pretty safe, modern world. Stillness isn't a predator waiting to attack us in the grass. Yet, we still have that ancient alarm blaring in our heads.
And constantly silencing this alarm with endless scrolling, binge-watching TV, or using substances leads to a psychological state known as experiential avoidance. We literally never learn to just be with ourselves or sit with uncomfortable emotions. And psychologists point out that constantly avoiding this experience is significantly linked to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and burnout. When we never let the brain rest and process, our mental health takes a massive hit.
Moving on to Section 4, the creativity connection.
Here's where things get really cool. Once you understand that this discomfort is just an alarm, you can choose to push through it. And when you do, boredom becomes the ultimate trigger for human innovation. A really fascinating study by psychologist Sandy Mann divided people into groups to test their creativity. One group did a standard everyday task. Another group was given a super boring task, copying numbers from a phone book by hand. The final group, though, was given an agonizingly boring task, literally just reading the phone book, which they called passive boredom. Afterwards, they all took a creativity test, and guess what? The group experiencing passive boredom actually produced the highest creativity scores across the board. The sheer discomfort of having absolutely nothing to do forced their default mode network to kick into overdrive and start making novel connections.
So the big takeaway here is pretty profound. Boredom doesn't suppress creative thinking, it triggers it. Every profound shower thought you've ever had, every seemingly random solution to a problem that magically popped into your head while you were driving or taking a walk, that is simply your default mode network doing exactly what it was built to do. It was connecting the dots because you finally gave it the quiet, uninterrupted space it desperately needed to run.
Finally, Section 5, reclaiming your downtime.
The really good news from psychologists and neuroscientists is that your ability to handle this quiet space, what researchers call boredom tolerance, is totally trainable. You can actually teach your brain to sit with the discomfort without immediately reaching for a distraction. Here are 3 super simple science-backed ways you can start rebuilding your cognitive health and invite boredom back into your life. Number 1, take a do-nothing walk. Leave the phone at home. No music, no podcasts. Just walk and let your mind completely wander. Number 2, schedule white space. Block out 15 to 30 minutes in your calendar with absolutely zero agenda. Just sit there, resist the urge to fill it with a task. And number 3, embrace waiting. The next time you're stuck in traffic or waiting in line for your coffee, resist the urge to pull out your screen. Just stand there. Notice what happens in your mind when you just let it be. So the next time you feel that restless itch, that sudden urge to check your phone for the 96th time today, remember that sitting with the discomfort might actually be the most productive thing you do all day long. Every time you reach for a screen to silence that temporary discomfort, you are short-circuiting one of the most sophisticated processes in your entire brain. You're trading a profound moment of insight, memory consolidation, and creative connection for a cheap 10-second dopamine hit. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. If you keep filling every single quiet moment with noise, what brilliant idea, what deep realization about your own life is your brain desperately trying to tell you that you are simply too distracted to hear?